artwork, critiques, Photoshop files, and reference sheets are all available on my Patreon.
Hey there guys and girls, I hope you're doing well. My name's Mikey, welcome back to my room. It's time for another tutorial. And following on from the last lesson we did, today we're going to be taking a look at how to draw the hips and the bucket area of the crotch for your own anime and manga characters when they're squatting down or doing the splits. Essentially, we're going to dive in and take a look at how the legs join into the body when they're being spread, because in that front region there are a few interesting things happening with how the ligaments meet into the front of the hip bones and so on. So we're going to break that down. We're going to take a look at the major groupings that are making this happen, but do not worry guys, with any luck this will be relatively beginner friendly, because I'm only really going to point out the stuff that you need to draw in terms of the final line work. I'm just going to happen to also show you all of my working to get up there to the answer. So if you're following along at home, I'm just drawing a kind of isometric angled big elliptical shape, which is going to be my guide for the bucket of the hips. I'm working relatively firmly. This is a very light guideline, but I want you guys to be able to see it on the camera. And what we're going to do is we're going to look down into the front of the torso area and see how everything connects. Now, this is going to be useful for if you're drawing any of your own anime and manga characters doing the splits or spreading the legs. Maybe they're earning some sweet money back up at the pole, or maybe they're just feeling very confident about things at the moment and proudly showing off. But also it's going to be useful for any types of anatomical illustration that you might be doing with your own life studies, because we're essentially looking at how things work here. So just as much as any anime and manga, with any luck, this is going to be useful to everyone. Now, what I'm doing here is just imagining that's that hips area. We've got how to draw hips and torsos and legs and so on, all sorts of tutorials up there. And this is certainly going to follow up from our strong leg tutorial as well. So make sure you have seen that. I'm going to imagine that, right, we've got the front of the body down here. Maybe we're catching a little bit of the tummy. So I'm going to go in for what might be just the belly button area. I'm just imagining our front surface line, a little bit of pop of the tummy. And then maybe things are going to go down to the bottom of the torso, down towards the private, somewhere over there. And I'm going to give myself the old kind of V sweep towards the middle, where I'm just going to imagine, okay, let's go slightly concavely, a V down here. Imagine your torso for your characters is a bit like an action toy. It's got this big kind of sweeping V shape before the joint of the legs come in. I'm doing a similar thing with a line up on this side. And that's going to help me go, okay, I'm going to have the firm, harder areas of the hips popping out here, the solid hip bone area that doesn't flex and squish when you've got things going on with your characters, and imagining that, okay, in that case, they're going to go forward here. Here's our little guideline there just for our squared off isometric shape. There we go, got the words out. So I'm going to use that just to say, right, my bucket of the hips area is going to come up here. And then it's going to go into that forward part of the body where we're going to sweep down. I'm essentially just imagining over this surface, the bottom part of the abdomen, round about here, and just sweeping up like so. Sorry about all these guidelines and gentle strokes, but we're going to build this up as we make our way around. Do remember, guys, I've got myself a scrap of paper here to rest my hand on. I'm using a super cheap disposable mechanical HB pencil. If you are vibing at home, and just make sure you're working on a number of sheets of paper on your desk as well, just so you've got a slightly nicer surface. Now I'm just going to bring this little guide sphere at the top where I've cut things up off just a little bit, bring that up a little bit further up there, just to say, right, we've got the obliques just starting to come in there as we go around the side, maybe a little bit off on there as well. Let's sweep a bit further around there like so, just constructing the top part of the hips area so that we can join all of those legs in together. So what's going on down here? Now, firstly, we've got this area around here where I'm dropping down below the abdominal wall and tucking very loosely in to kind of indicate the area of the privates. Now, we don't need to worry about them too much, but I'm just going to create this kind of mound or bulge here, because this is going to help us work into the inside of the muscles as they all connect. Now I'm going to, right here, through the middle of that hip line where we've got the legs ideally joining in, imagine a little joint here and another one right over there. And I'm going to have one leg just come out slightly towards us here, very foreshortened, and I'm going to be cutting these legs off just so that we can focus on this area. And we'll have one going sideways out so that we can really check out what's going on with the construction there as well. And with these legs, I'm going to start off with my cylinder shapes. That's our guideline that helps make things a little bit easier. I'm going to squish it just a little bit so that it's a little bit flattened out. And I'm going to imagine, right, that cylinder is going all the way across and around this area, just like so, and then sweeping out and around. So that might be where that guide joins in. But also I'm going to stop right here and get another similar, if only ever so slightly smaller shape just here. Now this isn't going to be a perfectly kind of squashed cylinder shape yet, but our guide is still going to be nice and basic so that we can use that to focus on. And I'm going to do a cylinder shape just coming out of this side as well. Around about up here, I'm going to start just inside where that hip pops out, come down to around about here, and then relatively flatly come off this way. This character's got their legs spread, but they're doing the splits, maybe sitting on the ground, and then coming down a little bit just to show that that's going to taper down towards the knee eventually. And then we've got our two kind of guides in place. I might even just bring this one to be ever so slightly something where we're seeing the inside, but that's only so we can map the surface. So I've got my two vague leg directions, my two vague leg shapes. What am I thinking of? Firstly, if we're going to look down and around for a character that's doing the splits, they're actually squeezing the glutes and the bum muscles a little bit as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a cheeky bit of bum curve just coming off the back of this, just like so. Now you might want to make more or less of this kind of action, depending on how curvy or slim your characters are going to be. And I do like to over-accentuate the curves and so on with my characters, but also because it means when we're doing these drawing tutorials, it helps show off all of the areas where you might just want to keep your thinking alive and your focus on, and you just want to exemplify. But I'm just trying to make sure that I'm going to keep the firmer lines for the lines that we're going to keep, and my lighter guidelines are just helping me with construction. So right, let's come around here. We've got this outside part of the leg coming down there, and that might actually sweep up and around because you've got the squeeze of the bum as it comes up and in. This line then is going to be a little bit less firm as we've got the bum muscles or even a bit of extra fat squeezing up and around, so it won't be quite as defined. And if this leg is coming up here, we know that we've got all these muscles over the top of the front, all of these quadriceps and so on. We've talked about that in a strong leg tutorial. They all meet up in the hip flexor, which is around about this point here, somewhere halfway between the outside edge of the hips, which is here if we're looking sideways on, and halfway between the inside edge of the abdominal wall. So I'm just going to imagine that's there. And then it's just going to sweep round. I think this is the sartorius line, basically the inside line that we like to put on our legs just to show the separation of the grouping of muscles as they come in and down and around. So the quads area is happening all up and around here, coming towards us. But if you notice when you see with character designs and they've got spread legs, there's some kind of tension and knotting of things happening around here in the front of the crotch just before it all meets in the middle. And what's going on there is you've got these adductor muscles, which are coming from the inside part of the leg, and they're all meeting right around about here into the front part of the pelvic bone. So what I imagine is on either side of where I've just put this little mound shape area for the zone of the privates, or where the privates are coming from, depending on the gender of your character, I'm going to come from either side and imagine that there's this connection sweeping out like so on the inside of the legs, and that's going underneath the muscles that are happening on the top. And I'm imagining this simply because people usually indicate a line here at the bottom, and on the inside of the leg they indicate a line here near the top to show where that's going in. And so what that means is that if we cut a little profile out of this leg, this is why I've cut this leg so short, so we can talk about this. Sure, there might be this lovely, great big curve coming over the top like a slice of ham and around to show all the muscles on the top. But as we come down to the inside, actually we're going to get a bump of another curving shape coming down on that inside edge, like so. Might even to imagine that sort of our lines coming in a little bit further there. And then if we've got a, now I'm not a anatomist, but let's say there's some good bit of bone going on there. It means we've got this entire lovely front part of the muscle groups of the legs. Here's our quad zone. But then also we've got this inside part of all of our adductors. And then all the area around the back where the glutes are going into the hamstrings and so on. So these are the bits that pull your legs together and pull them in. And I'm just going to exemplify this again. I'm just going to show you a little curve over the top as we go down there. Again, this is just a guideline to help map the surface of what I'm talking about. And then bang, popping out round about there before it sweeps back in. So let's look at that same situation just over here, and then we're going to focus on what's going on in the middle. So up here with this leg, right, I'm coming down through here. I'm happy that I've got some hip bone around about there. Then I might just have a generous bit of squeeze of the top of the muscle. I'm going to rotate my pencil in my hand a little bit. So I'm working with a slightly sharper edge. These lines are getting a bit furry. Let's just come down and around in there. And then over here, if my hip line is going across like this isometrically, I want to keep parallel to everything. So I'm going to think of a parallel line that's going right under here. This is behind the mound of the privates, right across the pelvic bone. That's what's happening inside. And on this edge, I'm going to just think of a line here where it all tucks in. From this point, I'm imagining that this essentially blossoms out all the way out to the inside part of the leg here and here, the way we're looking on. But all I'm actually going to be focusing on drawing for my final line work is a bit of a line here. Also, a bit of a line here. There might be a little bit of a divot happening on the inside of the leg around about here in shadow. I don't need to worry about that too much. And I'm just going to imagine that, right, this is my private zone here. But as I catch everything in here before I decide to draw everything disappearing underneath like here, and I'm just going to follow that line all the way around and up here. And I'm just going to move that center line a little bit as well, just to map that a little bit more accurately. There we go, as such. It means that, sure, this whole private zone is here with the muscles connecting underneath behind it, but they're happening right at the top. And this connection point, where we've got these adductor muscles coming into the front of the pelvic zone around about here, this is around about the part of the body where we go from thinking of the front of the torso area as a vaguely vertical plane. This is the point where the actual privates start happening below there at the very soonest. And this is where we start imagining that we're curving right in and under. And what I'm going to do in a time lapse is I'm probably even going to tuck this a little bit further in up here. I think I've just overworked how far down we go just to really accentuate that point. But don't worry, you'll see that in just a moment. What we're also going to do is imagine that, okay, this lovely bit of meat of the leg is going to connect in here and then also give us a nice squeeze line as we're coming down on the inside. I'm hooking down towards that edge. And again, I'm thinking about keeping the lines for the abdominal wall as we come down here, like so. Maybe I'm going to be keeping some of that tuck we've got at the lower part of the tummy line. And then coming down on that edge. And also, there's all of the glutes and bum muscle and area relatively flattened because we're sitting down. And that's going to be sweeping up from around about under here as well. I've got my hand all the way up the pencil here just so I can get a nice bit of sweep. I'm curling my arm around so I'm not blocking the camera as it connects into that part of the leg. And again, because of these zones here and here, I am just going to imagine ever so slightly that this is still a little bit in towards us. Again, we've got all sorts of other groupings and muscles and things going over on the top, but it means I'm just going to imagine that that surface of this leg coming down around about here, probably make that a bit straighter, but then boom, popping out at least a bit from this angle around about here. So that's what's going on down in this area. These bits just here as they meet in that's what's causing this line and this line to happen that you might be seeing in a lot of your anime and manga designs for characters that are just showing off the inside area for whatever reason, maybe just a power pose. I hope that helps give you a little bit of an idea of what's going on there. Again, like I said, I'm just going to quickly sweep up that construction around there. I'll sort that out in just a moment. But also, I just want to talk about what's happening around the back side as well. Because if these legs are squeezing out, just like we've said here, it means that things are squeezing behind as well. I'll keep this one very, very simple. But let's say we've got hips in this direction, like so. I'm just going to imagine that we're looking down at the back bucket area of the hips. So I've got little bits of flecks of pencil there. And then this is our center line leading up towards the spine. Okay, great. And then I'm in a similar way, I'm going to just slightly V off the situation down this side and up on this side. If I imagine that, right, this big zone of our hips curving around that elliptical shape again is coming off there. And I'm just going to imagine that the back is going to be popping up off over here somewhere. I'm just going to quickly cut that off. Something like so. This is how we're just constructing our way into things. Then I need to just think, right, okay, we've got our little joints happening around here, up and out in either direction. Really good spready, really good splits going out on either side. So I'm super quickly just going to imagine that that's joined into the leg here, which I'm obviously, unfortunately for this character, cutting off around about there. Let's get that cylinder shape in, just like so. And then another cylinder shape that's happening on top of things right here, as it's coming a bit more towards us. Disappearing again, just like so. Just mapping off that edge there. And then a bit I just want to focus on here is how that bum muscle is squeezing in. Now we've got our curve of the bum that we might bring around and down past the middle point because of our angle, and sweeping down and in. And as I get a bit lower, I'm starting to curve in more and more and more, trying to go for that golden ratio. And as we curve out and around, going below that little guide shaped bucket area now of the hips, I'm going to sweep out relatively levelly into the back of the quadriceps and that area of the leg. But up here, because things are getting squeezed, I might, depending on how luxuriously soft your character might be or how low the body fat might be, I'm going to just go up and around and really just imagine that squeeze is still occurring up there, because I'm going to have a load of tuck happening right about here. As this leg is up and the bum is squeezed in, I'm going to get a line in here just showing how all of that muscle is tucking and causing a bit of a fold and a crease there, before we of course sweep back out and around and complete the leg on that side. And then if I imagine that our triangular shape, which marks the bottom area of the spine, is happening around about here. Also, when you're going to get your kind of whale tail look, if that's where you're mapping out your underwear. So we've got the lumbar region of the back popping up and out there and around about here. And here is your superior posterior iliac spine, which is where you get those lovely bum dimples on some people. Oh, very, very good. Similar thing on this side. I'm going to imagine right up here, I'm going to get a load of bump out for the bum, certainly. Let's just squeeze some of that here. But I'm also going to come down and follow that curve past where that leg's coming out, around about here. And then as I come out from this side, a very similar thing. I might imagine that it's all connecting nicely into the back, but that sweep is coming right up and in for this whole squeezed surface area. And that area, I think I'm just going to push it a little bit more down and around here. Remember, your guidelines are super useful, but keep having a look at everything you're doing at every stage, just to spot areas that could be slightly improved. I'm going to sweep out a little bit wider there. There we go. Let's be a bit more generous with that bottom zone. So the side of the leg disappearing off in this zone. And we're seeing pretty much the back of the leg as it's squeezed out to the side with the splits. So I'm just going to finish off that little surface there. Getting a bit scratchy and vague with that pencil work, so I will just clean it up as well. Imagine all of that squeezing up over on there. And then if we're squeezing those bum shapes in here, we're going against that curve now, as the spine is sweeping up and out. That's how we get our nice mixture of curves and things. Obviously, we've got the laterals coming up down on that side. The obliques are sweeping down on this side, and the inside edge, and so on. But the most important part is, as long as you can see that, right, we're going down around the back of this bum, but sweeping out now. And as we do so, things are squeezing big time all the way over here as well. Very lush, very nice if your characters are doing the splits. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of an idea of what I'm thinking of. As I've mentioned, I'm aware that there's a lot of construction here, so please don't get too confused. I'm going to drop into some time lapse right now, clean things up a little bit, but also I'm going to give you an example of a great big spready. We've just done that tutorial about characters that are squatting down. Fantastic. So let's take a look at what's going on when that position's happening, that the legs are spread right out apart. And also our viewpoint is going to be a little bit lower in this example. I'm giving myself a very basic guide rectangle right now, just to say, hi, if this is the front, that is the underside. I'm going to do that before the time lapse, just because I want to point out how we can kind of use this particular zone of the abductors meeting in to understand that that's the point where we stop thinking about things being front and start thinking about things being under as we go into the torso. Okay guys, I'll see you in a sec. Hey there guys, and welcome back. So yeah, during that time lapse I just took a moment to ever so slightly tighten up that crotch area and curve around a little bit more on the inside edge of that abductor, just to thicken out the inside of the leg, but also show that this area is sweeping in and under. Also around here we pretty much covered everything we needed to about getting a nice plump squeeze on the bum when a spready is happening from behind. And I just wanted to run through another example, seeing as we've already covered crouching and squatting poses in that last tutorial. Make sure you've checked it out. Down here, if we come from a lower angle where we're catching up and inside the edge, you can see again where I've got this line here and this line here for the abductors coming in. That's coming in on either side of that kind of front private area, and it also marks the point where things actually then go from being front facing to sweeping under, where all the action happens. Also before, we've covered in those tutorials about how when you've got your legs bent over for a squat, you're squeezing the flesh out on either side, so you get this kind of big kind of sausage shape where the calf muscles squeezed out, and also the flesh on either side of the knee on the upper part of the leg is doing the same thing. Just imagine like a birthday clown doing some kind of animal balloon tricks. It's just squeezing around there to give you that idea that the flesh is all soft and malleable. So guys, I hope that's given you a little bit of an idea of what's going on and furthered your understanding of the inside of the torso crotch area, as well as how to have your characters doing the splits and spreadies, at least as far as the legs connecting in are concerned. We'll probably have a look at just some real basic designs for standing splits and overall drawing a full character, not just all of the details. But a great big thank you to those delicious patrons on Patreon, the ones whose names you've just been seeing on screen, because it's only thanks to your support that I'm able to keep making free drawing tutorials for everything I know over here on YouTube. So don't forget, as ever, if you'd like to grab a copy of this reference sheet and every single other tutorial that I've done just for $1 over on Patreon, much love. The links are of course in the description below. Let me know what you want to see next time for a further tutorial in the comments section, and I'll see you then. Take care.